shot him 6 times.
What's going on, horror fanatics? Welcome to
I shot him 6 times!
YouTube Horror Movie Channel. As you know, I'm the host and creator of the channel, Marcus. If you have not done so already, please shoot this video a like. It helps out with the YouTube algorithm a ton. As well as if you're a new viewer to this channel, please shoot that subscribe button as well as that notification icon so you get all the latest content updates to the channel. As well as if you'd like to become a member to the channel, shoot over to the channel dashboard, shoot that join button and choose what level membership best works for you. Okay everyone, so before I get into the crux of this video, just want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day. Hope you all enjoy your day and be safe out there. If you do decide to go out tonight and have a good time at the bars, whatever bar is open, be safe, make sure you catch an Uber, don't drink and drive, so on and so forth. I know I sound like a parent, but I don't want to see nobody get hurt tonight, especially celebrating their independency. Okay everyone, so let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to be talking about none other than Sidney Prescott, our iconic final girl from the Scream franchise that we hope makes her triumphant return in Scream 7. However, in this video, I will not lie, I have a feeling that I'm not only going to ruffle some feathers, I might set off some fireworks in your mind when it comes to a certain question about the character that I have never heard anyone in the fandom ever present to ask. And that question is, was Sidney Prescott at home during her mother's murder? If so, why didn't she help her? Let's dig in, shall we? Now, before we get into the question about whether Sidney was home or not when her mother was being murdered by Billy Loomis and Stu Macher, let's take it back to when Sidney was on the couch flicking through the channels, and then we see Gale Weathers pop up on the screen talking about the latest murders in Woodsboro, while also bringing up Sidney's mother's murder from the year prior, Maureen Prescott. Now, there are some fans in the fandom that believe that Maureen Prescott was not murdered in her home. However, if you listen to the dialogue by Gale Weathers when she's on the TV, she is at Town Square and states that Maureen's body and her murder took place only minutes away from Town Square, which in my opinion implies that Maureen was murdered at her house. Let's also fast forward to Scream 3. When Sidney Prescott is in the studio on the set of her old house, what looks like her old house, a replica, she goes into this room that is supposed to be Maureen Prescott's room. She is baited in there by Ghostface, but she hears the sound of her mother Maureen. And you see the blood on the bed, all that stuff, very, very graphic scene, and it implies that Maureen was killed at home in her room. But what I want you guys to pay attention to, especially when you guys go back and rewatch that scene, is what Maureen says, or at least Ghostface, but using Maureen's voice. Maureen says to Sidney, "I can't protect you at all. You don't deserve to be protected. You didn't protect me." Okay, so before I get into why this piece of dialogue from Scream 3 is significant, I want to take it back to Scream 1996 real quick, where Sidney and Gale are talking outside of the high school, where they are talking about Maureen Prescott's court case in Cotton Weary. You hear Sidney say that on the night of her mother's murder, she saw, or what she at least assumed to be, Cotton Weary leaving her house with a particular coat on. This particular coat had the blood of Maureen Prescott after her murder all over it. We all know that was Billy Loomis who was wearing that coat, who took that coat and framed it in Cotton Weary's car. However, before we get that reveal, obviously, when Sidney and Gale are talking, Gale responds to this by saying, "Cotton was drunk that night. He left that coat at your house after your mother seduced him." Sidney then responds to Gale by saying, "I saw him leave wearing it." Why this piece of dialogue, as well as the piece of dialogue from Scream 3, where we hear Ghostface using Maureen's voice, telling Sidney that she doesn't deserve to be protected because Sidney did not protect her. The reason why these two pieces of dialogue are very important is because they are telling us one thing. They are telling us that the night of Maureen Prescott's murder, Sidney Prescott was indeed present at the house the time her mother was being murdered by Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. We also have to take into account that while Sydney was in the bathroom at school, she heard two girls, the girl in the bathroom and the cheerleader in the bathroom, talking about her, to which we hear the girl in the bathroom say she watched her mom get butchered in reference to Sydney. This also puts Sydney at the house when her mom was being murdered. With all that being said, I think the question definitely needs to be asked, why didn't Sydney help Maureen while she was being attacked, possibly preventing her subsequent death? I think I may have the answer to that. After going back and rewatching the scene where Sydney and Billy are in Stu Macher's parents' bedroom, having a conversation, apologizing to each other, so on and so forth, you hear Sydney say, I cannot keep wallowing in the grief process forever. She also says, I can't keep lying to myself about who my mother was. Now, why that piece of dialogue is important is because that implies that Sydney Prescott knew about the other men outside of Cotton Weary. She may have not known who, but that definitely implies that there were more men that Sydney knew about that her mother was involved with. Because in my opinion, if it was just Cotton, I feel like she would have chosen a piece of wording like, I can't keep lying to myself about what my mother did, or about what my mother did with Cotton. With her saying, I can't keep lying to myself about who my mother was, that implies, in my opinion, that Sydney knew that there were more men outside of Cotton Weary that was involved with her mother. Now, why that is important when it pertains to Sydney not helping Maureen in the moment of her attack. Now, this may seem a little bit dark, and I said it at the beginning of this video that I might ruffle some feathers in the fandom as well as with Sydney Prescott fans, which is basically the entire fandom anyway. But in my opinion, I think the reason why Sydney did not help Maureen in that moment was strictly out of revenge, out of bitterness, out of anger. I think Sydney heard Maureen possibly screaming in her bedroom while she was being attacked, and Sydney just chose not to do anything about it because she knew what her mother was doing. She knew that her mother was basically going behind her dad's back while he was away and having all these affairs, and everybody around town is talking about it. I think that this infuriated Sydney, and when push came to shove, I think she just decided not to do anything about it. Now, you can also make the argument that maybe she froze in the moment. Maybe she was going back and forth. Should I help? Should I not help? This is my mother, but at the same time, she's tearing our family apart. So on and so forth. You can definitely say that she maybe froze in that moment. But I'm going to lean towards more that she just chose not to help Maureen. And the reason why I'm leaning more towards that is because, especially the way we see Sydney traumatized after her mother's death, that would imply that if she was there at the house while Maureen was being attacked, that she would at least tried to help. She would have tried to save her mother, right? The love and the affection and the emotion that she shows after her mother's death would it lead you to believe that if Sydney was there at the house and heard this commotion, heard Maureen screaming, so on and so forth, then she would have tried to intervene or at least called 911. However, I am now led to believe that all that quote-unquote grief, all that emotion that we saw after the events of Maureen's death, as well as in Scream 3 when she hears Ghostface using Maureen's voice on the voice changer and sees the prop room of her mother's death, I am now led to believe that not only was it grief, but it was also guilt. Sydney was going through the guilt of not saving her mother when she had the chance to do so. Now, I don't believe Sydney helped Billy and Stu with murdering her mother, and I don't know if this would even be important to the newer films or to the overall story arc of the character down the line. But, in my opinion, it does add a layer of darkness we wouldn't normally associate with the name of Sydney Prescott. Because we hold the character to such high regard, I think we tend to overlook and not question certain things we've seen in or heard in the dialogue for the character's storyline. This is one of them, in my opinion. But okay everyone, that is it for this video. Leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know your thoughts on what I talked about here in the video. Is this a question that you ever thought of to ask when it pertains to the Sidney Prescott character? Or is this question something that you simply overlooked when it pertains to the character? Once again, this is
I shot him 6 times!
YouTube Horror Movie Channel. I'm your host and creator of the channel, Marcus. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. Thank you all for watching.